Mark, I didn't know I was going to be so. Anyway, yeah, the cell phone thing. Now remember our policy here. If your cell phone goes off, you have to come up here and sing the national anthem. This first inductee is quite an honor for our state and that all the things. You know the words? If you're under 18, you're exempt from this. You can't exist without it. Other than Wally Parks, this guy is more responsible for drag racing as it is today than any one individual. People have no idea what this guy has accomplished over the years. He actually majored in art in college. He was quite the artist, but took an interest, as we all did, in drag racing by attending a drag race. And Wally Parks hired him in 1969 actually to sell ads for National Dragster, but real quick, when Jack Hart, Executive Vice President of NHRA, realized this guy's had other talents, Steve was the buffer, if you will, between the racer and the home office. NHRA, obviously, you had to make income and whatnot, and they were pretty strict in some of their rules because the sport was quite a renegade sport. But Steve was that buffer between those guys and the racer to implement the rules. He is more responsible for a track owner's headaches than any one individual. He scraped the first racetrack ever. And I wish I'd known that years ago when I was scraping Rockingham on a Friday night for Chestnut too, and I would have cussed him every second. The biggest expense and most energy we waste is track prep. He scraped the first racetrack. By accident, he found out that concrete, there's another national anthem singer. He found out by accident that concrete makes for the best traction on starting lines. He's the first guy to evolve concrete starting pads, as we are. He was the first guy to use traction compound at a national event in the 1972 Super Nationals on Turner Motor Speedway. He invented the water box, the trough that we have to put water in. That was his idea. This is just scratching the surface of what he's implemented over the years and what he's done for safety and negotiating with racers. Racers, now don't take this wrong, sometimes one of the most friendly people in the world to work with, especially during a race and during competition. He had to make some tough decisions against guys like Don Garlitz, Don Perdome, Shirley Downey, Bob Glidden. Not real pleasant people at the racetrack, quite frankly. But he was always that buffer, and he's been known for decades as the racer's friend. And he really has been the racer's friend. He has been the friend of drag racing. He realized years ago that we got to start saving some of these old cars because they're all going away. So there should be a museum of some kind. And then when Don Garlitz started his, Steve said, you know, this needs to be in California. So he started accumulating stuff. He convinced NHRA to start a Hall of Fame, or museum rather, and they had a 1,500 square foot building in Pomona where they started it with. NHRA, being cost conscious, said, how are you going to pay for this? So he started the drag racing reunion that he has now, but originally the thing in Bakersfield that they had as an income producer. Frank Spittle had the first reunion of anybody, our own Frank Spittle, years and years ago. And anyway, Steve took that idea, and that's spawned the Nitro reunion he does every year in Irwindale. I've been for the past several years, and it's just an incredible 2 days. Don Perdome, Richard Tharp, all the old timers, Gary Beck are there. John Force always makes an appearance because he's considered an old timer as well. But I cannot give Steve enough credit for where we are today. If it weren't for this guy, none of us would be in this room today. Would you please welcome the racer's friend, Steve Gibbs.
Well, I had quite a career, huh? Forgot about a lot of that stuff. But, it's good to be in North Carolina again. I was born here in Franklin, a little town, far west part of the state. Left in 1947 to California. But it's always a pleasure to come back. I still have family in that part of the state that settled there in the 1700s. So a lot of history in North Carolina. It's always nice to be honored for work you did, and I appreciate the recognition here today. I put in 48 years with NHRA. They were good, productive years. Wouldn't trade it for the world. Blue collar guy had a chance to make a decent living doing something he enjoyed and something he loved. I get a lot of credit for track prep. Now all of a sudden no prep seems to be the hot thing, so maybe I did something wrong, I don't know. But I won't be up here a long time. I'll give you a couple of little stories about how track prep can go wrong, though. One of the first tracks we sprayed it was hard to find a spray rig to use this stuff. And then, this VHT compound that we use is glue. Basically, it's glue, very sticky stuff. So we'd find somebody with an agricultural sprayer and hire the guy to spray the stuff down. It was always a mess to clean up. But so we were at Pomona one year, and somebody had the bright idea to use a helicopter spray rig to spray the racetrack. It's a crop duster, basically. So this guy lands the helicopter at the fairgrounds, and we fill up the tanks with the VHT, and he puts the spray bars down and sprayed the racetrack, and a couple passes each way, and perfect. I mean, it was just smooth and nice and bitchin', right? Except if you sat in about the first row or two of the grandstands, you got stuck, and the photographers, all their gear that they put on top of the guardrail, stuck. So we never did that one again. The helicopter pilot wasn't real happy either. The other one at Indy, we're getting the track ready, wash the track, scrub it, get her nice and clean the night before we're going to start the event. Spray it with about 4 drums of straight VHT. Boy, you walk out there, take your shoes off. What we didn't know, and at that time they didn't have concrete guardrails. They had the steel guardrails with a gap about that big between the bottom of the rail and the surface of the ground. Well, the grounds guy decided he wanted to mow the grass the night before. The grass was all on both sides of the racetrack, and it was windy, and so he mowed the grass. Well, the grass went on the track. Well, it stuck. And I got out there the next morning, and I looked down. It looked like a putting green. I mean, it was just as green, almost like this carpet here. But it took about 3 hours of driving everything we could up and down. Anyway, that's some of the stuff we did. But it was a great career. I appreciate Wally Parks for allowing me to do what I did all those years. Life is good. On a personal note, we lost our home to a fire in California in November. So we've been going through quite an episode, and I would like to recognize my fiancée Marge. It was her home that burned, and we made a nice recovery. We've had the support of the racing community, but it's been quite a challenge. But once again, it's great to be in North Carolina. It's great to receive this award, and I thank you very much.
Once again, cell phones off, please.
Like Bubba said, folks. Nip them in the bud. All right, now we move on to a local track racer. Get to the Hall of Fame this year. To do that induction, Mr. Tony Brown will come up with Mr. Burrow Kendrick.
All right, folks, the year was 1966. I was born. Thank you. No, I'm kidding. 1966, this man began his racing career at Shuffletown Dragway, which I know most everybody in here knows about Shuffletown Dragway. Even if you just started racing the last couple of years, that name stands out among drag strips. And we're going to say quit, because I don't think he's done yet. But he made his last pass recently in 2017. So that's over 50 years of racing. And of course, it began with the gas, pounds per inch stuff back in the 60s into the early 70s. And I knew a lot about that because our families were friends, and I grew up in his shop. He even has a reel tape of me trying to say the word Blue Goose, which happened to be on the side of his 56 Chevrolet. Like if you go to, there's a place called Shuffletown Grill. It's the only thing kind of left that carries the Shuffletown tradition. And if you go in there on the right day, you'll see a TV screen that plays a lot of the older clips and a lot of the old videos. And what you'll see on those videos mainly is like a Chevy 2 with coming on strong on the side, Frankie Flanagan. You might see my dad's 57 on there, but what you're gonna see mostly is this blue 56 Chevrolet going up down that racetrack. And after that, bracket racing came along, and hey, he embraced that too. And he ended up winning a lot of bracket racing, obviously, over the years. Then came along the IHRA really getting strong with the national events and the pro-ams. And he went national event racing. And with a certain person that's out here in the audience, he teamed up with several guys over the years. I can sit here and talk about all the wins and the national event wins, which he has, and probably 100 different wins that he's had. But it goes a lot deeper than that. Joel Collins, would you stand up, please? He's standing over here. All right. Joel, on the top dragster team, which Burrow drove for, he also later on kind of jumped on the other side of things and kind of on the business side of things, and had a driving school along with a ride-along program, and Burrow was kind of the lead instructor on most of all that. So he worked really closely with Joel. And then of course, Andy, another man that owned a killer top dragster machine that actually had to slow down sometimes to qualify at the 6 flat and slower deal. That happened to you at Z-Max, I believe. But the point of the whole thing, I'm not going to keep you long because I need to get him up here, is he's not a naysayer. You know, when gas or pounds per inch racing was big, I wasn't around and old enough to know this, but I know when bracket racing came along, a lot of guys said, no, I'm not doing that, that's stupid. No, he started bracket racing, he kept on winning. Well then, you know, of course, delay bosses came along, oh, that's cheap. No, he bought a delay boss and kept on winning. And of course, all the national events and the traveling and going after points and stuff, he just kept enjoying racing. And I guess the biggest thing is he changed his ways to keep enjoying his sport. And a lot of people, there's so many people that race with the pounds per inch stuff that never did it again, or they bracket raced a while, and this guy's done it all. Burl Kendrick, come on up. I had some things I could say, but I didn't.
Thank you, Tony. It's an honor to be inducted into North Carolina Drag Racing Hall of Fame. I feel quite honored. I guess you could say I had the first taste of drag racing in the mid-50s when I was able to tag along with my older brother, Everett Kendrick. Everett and his friends all raced the local tracks. Now, the racers would take their street-driven cars to the track, pop the hubcaps, race the cars, and hopefully get them back home. But my brother, Everett Kendrick, wanted to go full racing. So he bought a 1934 Ford 5-window coupe with a 331 cubic inch Chrysler Hemi. So I helped him for a few years with the motor at home and at the track, and I was considered one of the crew. We were at a race in Chester, South Carolina in 1958 when Everett had to leave the track to go home to Charlotte. So the guys threw me in the car, and I raced my way to the finals where I faced Ohio George Montgomery. Well, I was tickled to death to come away with second place trophy. But I was only 15 years old. Didn't have a driving license. Now this story is documented on the internet called the history of Chester Drag Strip. And I think Frank Spittle did a lot of the research and even had pictures and has a photo of the very car I drove that weekend. I like to fast forward to 1966. That's when my younger brother, Donnie Ray, and I went in together and bought a 56 Chevrolet. It was a straight axle gasser, and most of the work was already completed. we bought a junkyard 283 Chevrolet motor. We painted the car blue, and we named it the Blue Goose. Now, Donna Ray and I have raced a car for a while at Shuffletown when we shared the driving chores. Now, the 56 was one of the first of 5 or 6 cars that I owned and drove over the next 50 years or so. I'd like to thank David Gibson. David Gibson and I raced for almost 8 years together. We won many races in Shuffletown, Mooresville, Greer, and also 2 big races at Farmington Dragway. I would like to thank Joel Collins for everything that we accomplished in the 6 years or so that we had the racing school, the ride-along dragster, and even racing the IHRA. Joel and I have students out there now racing, making rounds, and winning races. In fact, we have 2 world championship drivers out there now. Tish Wilson and Jacob Elrod. On the same page, I'd like to thank Wicks Filters for sponsoring Joel and I for the time that we were in business. And in fact, we had all our cars wrapped with the Wicks Filters logo. Well, I'd like to thank my good friend Ron Bales. Besides Ron jumping in and helping Andy and I with our top dragster at some key races where we needed extra help, Ron and I took our street rods to many cruise-ins and car shows. Now, Ron has the coolest 1950 Ford convertible in the country. And I had up to 2 years ago a 32 Ford Roadster. So Ron and I, when we were not at the racetrack, we had a lot of good times at the car shows and cruises. Now, I'm the kind of guy I like to save the best for last. Andy Burnett. Andy put me in one of the fastest and quickest cars in NHRA top dragster. With the Alan Johnson 481X engine, we nailed down a lot of #1 qualifiers. And you can always find our names at the top of the qualifying sheet. Now think about it. The NHRA top dragster is merely a bracket race. So if you can imagine taking a car that runs 6 O's in a quarter of a mile at over 230 miles an hour, well, I don't know, just sick, I guess. But I'd like to thank Andy for giving me the opportunity for driving the car. In closing, I'd like to thank everybody for coming out tonight and enjoy the rest of the show.
Well, next I need Mr. Franklin Spittle to come up here to introduce Tommy Grove into the North Carolina Drag Racing Hall of Fame.
Tommy Grove. Many of you in here have heard that name for 50 years or more. We remember him as one of the greatest fuel funny car racers ever. But before that, he worked with his father, who ran a car repair business. And when he was 16 years old, he did what so many Southern California youngsters did. He put a flathead Ford engine in a Model A Ford and went drag racing with it. And in 1955, when Chevrolet came out with the new V8 engine, he bought one of those cars and decided he would hop up that totally original 265 cubic inch engine in it. And he bought a Chad Herbert roller cam for it. And Tommy had so much success with that car that Chet called him and asked him if he would like to come to work for him. So he was there when Chet built the Beast 2, I guess it was, the twin engine Chevy powered dragster, and also was with him when he built the 3-engine Bonneville car. But he began in the early 60s, 1962, he bought a new 409 Chevy. He was out on the drag strip with it regularly and beating just about everybody there in the super stock class. And he got the attention of Chrysler, and they wanted him to come and start racing for them. So he took advantage of that and went to driving for Melrose Motors, who was a Plymouth dealership, new dealership that had help, financial help from Chrysler. And so this was in, like I said, it was in 1962, and the Cuban Missile Crisis was going on. And Tommy came up with the suggestion of, so many people were naming their cars back then, why don't we call this car the Melrose Missile? So that's where that name started from. And Tommy entered the NHRA Winter Nationals in the super stock class in 1963 and won the class. He entered in the next year, 1964, and he won again the NHRA Winter Nationals. He got one of the altered wheelbase Plymouths to run in the 65 season, but after testing that car, he didn't feel like it was safe to drive. And his friend, Gas Ronda, had been telling him that Ford Motor Company was interested in him coming aboard on their racing team. So he switched to Ford in 65, started running Mustangs, and he ran a Mustang for the rest of his career, approximately about 10 years. He was one of the first guys that got to work with the Ford 427 single overhead cam engine. To this day, many remember that as the greatest racing engine ever built. And he became an ace at tuning that engine and also making it live. So he became a very popular match racer with Jungle Jim and Prudhomme and you name it. They were out there match racing across the country, staying busy and making a good living at it. But what really changed his life was his friend Mickey Thompson. This was back when all the race teams were starting to get t-shirts to sell to help pay their expenses. And so Mickey Thompson called him. He knew that there were t-shirt printing companies in the Charlotte area. By the way, Tommy had come into Charlotte from California in about 1966 to be work out of the Holman and Moody shop. And of course, Holman and Moody was the best known racing company in the world probably at that time. But he stayed with Ford and he stayed with Holman and Moody the rest of those years that he raced, and he just really become a household name if you were into drag racing back then and interested in funny cars, and who wasn't back then. But as I was getting ready to say, he he changed his life basically by kind of by accident with Mickey Thompson not being able to get enough t-shirts printed for his needs. And so Tommy did get hooked up with a t-shirt company here in Charlotte, and through Tommy's dealings with the guy that was running the shop, he wound up buying it. And he began using the same technology that he had used on building and improving race cars to doing the same with printing t-shirts, manufacturing and printing t-shirts. And that's what changed his life. He got so busy that he did not have time to race. And at one time, Tommy Grove had 4,000 people working for him in that industry, and was awarded a European Special Award for what he had done for the industry. So, Tommy Grove, we're so pleased to have you become a member of the North Carolina Drag Racing Hall of Fame.
Thank you, Frank. I don't know what else to say. You said about all of it. Oh, mercy. Yeah, racing was really my life. I started racing cars probably when I was 14 years old, going to the drag strip. And I have to lie about my age, and started doing real well, and one thing led to another, and I'd have people wanting me to use their products because I was setting records, and so I started using all these different products so they could advertise and use my name, and things like that just kept going on, and that got me to work with all the engineers at Ford, GM, and Chrysler. And so I never quit drag racing. I got to work with engineers, and they would learn things I thought ought to be changed. They'd change things on engines, and it just, that was my life, living that, doing that. And when I worked for Chrysler, the Ramjars and the Gold Commandos, they were well known for, they were Chrysler engineers. And when Ford, none of their cars that they were working on could beat me, they decided to get me to go to work for them, which I did. And through that, I wound up working through Holman Moody in Charlotte, and with all the drag strips around, I just couldn't get enough drag racing. I would book the car in to run 3 or 4 times a week, and I made a good living doing that. And anything I'd need to change or want to change, working through like Ford Motor Company at that time, we made a lot of changes, and it was a lot of fun for me, a lot of good living. That was my life, and I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I enjoyed getting recognition all over for what I did, and I thank you people for coming here today. I mean, it's a joy for me to just come here and see what's going on still in racing. I wish I could have still stayed in racing, but once I got into the textile industry part, I never had time to even look at racing. And I'll be 90 in May, so getting too old to go around and do a lot of things I'd like to do. And anyway, I appreciate all you being here, and I appreciate being honored here. I don't know what else I can say except thank you all for being here. It's been good. It's been fun for me and enjoying for me, and it's been fun meeting some people I haven't seen for years and years and years. And thank you.
100. All right, next up, Mr. Bill Blair, come up to induct Alfred Williams into the North Carolina Drag Racing Hall of Fame.
Well, folks, I'm a round tracker. Really? Right, Greg?
Yes, sir.
How I got into drag racing was by accident and wasn't much, but really I started out round tracking and worked for American Performance Center, which that was Jim Pascal and Warren Pratt. They had a contract with American Motors and I was building engines for them. And that was 1969 to 70, and then opened up my own shop there in High Point, Mobile Blair Automotive. And by doing that, I began to have people come to see me, and they were drag racers. One of the first ones I had known in drag racing was Sam Kennedy. He built the Daddy's racetrack up at Tri-City Speedway, and Roy Hill worked for him. And Roy left a red rag on the carburetor, and Sam fired it up and quit immediately. I guess Roy don't want to talk about that, but anyway, that didn't have to do with Roy. But then the next one has been Mike Kennedy and Gary DeHart. Mike Kennedy went to work for me, and we were porting heads back then using rock grinders instead of carbides, you know. And ended up buying a flow bench, and Mike, as you know, is in the Drag Race Hall of Fame, and one of our first customers was much younger, towards the mountain area somewhere, the Charlie Brown car. And then the guys started coming over from Greensboro. That would have been Boone Patton and Donnie Dawes, and then I met Alfred Williams. And back one of the flow benches later on, I sold to Alfred Williams, a flow bench called the Superflow 300. But drag racing to me was always interested. Then I got into drag racing, and I got to meet some wonderful people. And so I guess we started the Drag Race Hall of Fame some years ago through Norman Drouillard and Jerry Joyce and you know, Bubba's daddy, a great guy, you know, run Piedmont Drag Strip, used to go run playground. But Jim Turner was a great guy, and I'm glad those guys got together and started this deal. But get back to the deal here with Alfred Williams and meeting him, and I heard a lot about Alfred and finally got to meet him. And he was sponsored by Billy Christ Craddock, as I remember, and I don't recall what he had wrote on the car, but he was up and down the East Coast racing, match racing. And you gotta remember, if you're back in drag racing back in the 60s, the factory cars, the Chevrolets, the Pontiacs, the 4.9s, 421s, 406s, and so forth, 427 Fords. And then it went sort of stale, and then the boys started that pro stock deal up yonder, what, in Englishtown, Jenkins or somebody, and just blossomed. And right here in North Carolina, right here in the Piedmont section, there was dozens of pro stock guys, and I think the drag tracks really survived with these guys on pro stock every weekend. If you went to Piedmont Drag Strip, you'd park a mile or two away. To get in that bus, you had to walk that far. It filled up real quick. But one of the guys that was a standout was Alfred Williams, and Alfred's been a good ambassador to drag racing, in my opinion, and runs a machine shop to this day. He's worked every day, and I'd like to introduce Alfred Williams. Alfred Williams, ladies and gentlemen.
I'd like to thank everyone. Started out racing, 10 years old. I got me a soapbox derby set of wheels and 2 axles and a steering wheel. And we built it in the dirt floor behind my mom's house in a garage. Anyway, it's been on a race ever since then. I was around 10 years old then. Anyway, at 12 years old, I started running down the drag strip. My dad took me. Enjoyed all of it. I think the car run about 60 mile an hour wide open in a quarter of a mile. About highway speed limit. But anyway, I've raced all over the country. I've helped everybody I knew as friends. I've met some best people I've ever knew in my life in the world as far as racers. And I also have saw the whole United States through the windshield of a truck. But anyway, enjoyed racing. It's been a good time. I've met so many people are so good, so nice through the years. And I really enjoyed the whole deal. But anyway, that's about it. I'm gonna give you a lengthy conversation.
And also, I guess he forgot, but the first, second IHRA Pro Stock cars, so Alfred Williams, good achievement. Well, folks, the Lifetime Achievement Award up next goes to a guy that has put his heart and soul in the sport of drag racing. I personally know it, because I've seen him on the drag strip racing and behind that microphone. To put Rico Gardner, Mr. Extreme, into that's right. Mr. Rick Ford and Kevin Shipper. Take it away, guys. Y'all doing good.
Thank you guys, everybody, for being here. My colleague Kevin Shipman, we've been doing this for a long time, either tag teaming or whatever you call it. But the guy that we've come to introduce this afternoon is probably the most electric, charismatic, get your butt out of the seats announcer that I've ever known. I've known Rick my whole life, and there's not a whole lot of people that's ever done it any better than he has. He's raced his whole life. He's helped people race his whole life. His life is the racetrack. Piedmont is his home. It's always been his home. And we admire you, Rick. I admire you. I look up to you and have for a long time. And here's Kevin Shipman to take it from here.
Good afternoon. I'd like to, first of all, congratulate all the new members of the Hall of Fame and all the old members. We appreciate all of you and thank you all for coming. When you talk about Rico, he's had two lives in this thing. He's had the racer life. I've seen him as a little boy racing. He's the first man I ever raced, first man I ever lost to. But one of the things that gets me about him is he's an entertainer. And I thank Bob Harris for a lot of that, because Bob stuck that mic in his hand and he ain't stopped since. But one of the big things I remember about him is one day we had a jet car come to the track. And Rico was just talking him up, blah, 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 blah. And the guy, Rico said, you know, I'd ride with you, blah, blah. And the guy said, well, go get your jacket. Rico said, what? He said, go get your jacket. Rico called his crew, says, go get my jacket, because he's not going to back down. He never seen him back down. So the last famous words that I'll never forget in drag racing was Rico, when he got in that dragster and that got popped the afterburner. Rico still had the mic in, and then he said, I don't even know your name. Ladies and gentlemen, to be inducted for the Lifetime Achievement Award, which he's had a lifetime of doing this thing, and he's helped a lot of people. If you needed a part, you go see Rico. He'd take care of it for you. And I think this is a well-earned award. Here he is, Mr. Rico Gardner.
Have any kind of paper or anything, but first of all, let's thank the man upstairs for allowing me to be here. My racing career started when I was about 16. Me and Roy Hill used to sneak into Piedmont Dragway and race. That's how long I've been doing it. But as the road went on, I started doing this, I started doing that. Well, I had two people in my life that could control me outside of my mother. That was Mr. Jim Turner. He was always the principal, and he was the only one that could keep me, hey, calm it down. Well, how I got to be on this microphone, I was head of security at Piedmont Dragway. And we had an announcer there. He was talking about how good the food was, this and that. So Bob Harris, I don't know what he did, but he came up to me and said, here, take this mic. Well, I ran the race that night, and with that, he said, you'll never do anything except talk at Piedmont Dragway. That started my career. And if you want to talk about stuff that you did or didn't do, I have a class of my own called Rico Real Street. That was between Jim and Bob that allowed me to have that class, 20 years strong. I don't know if my son would ever forgive me. He would have been the track champion in the 749 class. A guy's car broke. We had 2 cars. I let him use my other car, and he beat my son in the finals. You know, we did not lay that. Yes, my son back there right now. If I wouldn't have let the guy, but you know, he said, "Man, I don't have nothing to drive." I said, "Well, if you can beat anybody, go ahead on." So he took one of my vehicles and beat one of my other vehicles for the championship. I don't know if I ever get over that. I don't know if my son ever get over that. But as we continue to go down the road, I am so thankful. This mic don't do me any justice because, see, I'm hyper. I got to start moving around and all this and that. This is new to me. But that's all I got to say, and I thank you all for having me.
If you ever get that chance to go on the big dog races, please do. This is that man right there. That's how to do it. Well, folks, this award here, it is home for us as members of the North Carolina Drag Racing Hall of Fame. We renamed it the Jim and Dora Memorial Award. And I thought, I know a group or a family or a husband and wife that's well deserving of this. Back in the days when my dad, Norman, and us, we run Farming Dragway, we had great folks around us. You can't call it competition, but we was on the drag strip business. They run Elk Creek, they run East Bend, but they done it as a family. And that's what this is about, and Jim and Dora done the same thing. I'm proud to bring their son up here, Darren, come up, because I know he's got a long speech, so he's gonna keep it 7 minutes. But there's a lot to talk about. His mom and dad, Tommy and Dale Morton, folks. Thank you.
Hey, this is obviously not about me, but I'll mention this. I'm 59 years old, and I want all you Hall of Famers to understand that I was not born when my parents started their careers. So I grew up with you guys in your prime, and I'm in awe of all of you. Before I start, I want to mention this. Last night, my dad had a spell, and he ended up in the hospital. So he's not here today, nor my mother. And I told him, I said, "Dad, that's a pretty shitty reaction time." And then I told him, this is not about burnouts. Today was about burnouts, not burning through your deductible. It's devastating too. And I can assure you that this honor is a treasure to them, true treasure. And we're going to video this so they can see it. They'll be thrilled. And while I'm here, I want to mention that our friend Larry Waller is battling a health issue. And, you know, driving up here, you think about in drag racing, we do our very best to try to go just a little quicker, just a little faster. And then when we flip it over and we talk about life, we want to slow it down just a little bit. So what I would like for you to do, if you're the praying type, if you're the thought type, or the type that you are, I just ask that you keep my family and Larry Waller's family in your encouragement. That's what I'd like to ask. I am standing here honored to talk about our parents, Tommy and Nell Morton. I have 7 minutes and I perfected the most I can say in that time. I'm going to tell you to get your ears in high gear because we're going to set a national record. Buckle up. First, I want to thank all of those with the North Carolina Drag Racing Hall of Fame who are responsible for this true honor for my parents. And I will, even with only 7 minutes, I'm going to pause and say that again. This is a true honor, and my family recognizes it. And I want to say a special thank you to Mark Joyce. Mark walked us through this entire process. Thank you, Mark. You've been a friend, but more so, you are a fantastic ambassador for drag racing. Thank you. You deserve applause. Yes, our parents had many big names: Ronnie Sox, Soxon Martin, Lee Edwards, Don Carlton, Ricky Smith and the Country Shindig Maverick, Wildman Harold Denton, Warren Johnson, Jerome Bradford, Grumpy Jenkins, Shoe Baby Platt, Alfred Williams, Sam Carroll, Jack McClamrock, Don Clemens, Butch Cornodle, Roberta Schultz, and Bunny Burkett. Jet car guys like Art Arfons, the Green Monster, Dave Corey, Fred Sibley, even Big Willie Robinson and Tamiko from Los Angeles, California. In the King Daytona and Queen Daytona cars, it was Street Racers Brotherhood, they called it, and their slogan was Cars Can Unite People. And that was fantastic for East Bend Dragway in the 1960s and all through the 70s. And Zach Reynolds would often fly his airplane right over the track at East Bend, sometimes upside down and sometimes just a few feet off the ground. But importantly, and maybe even more importantly, we had those that showed up every single weekend. Arnold Thomas and his sons Ronald and Donald. That dang Donald never wore a pair of shoes in his life. Y'all seen that boy. Wayne and Brenda Dollyhigh, Bill Hull and his wife in their Corvette, the Hulls, the Holders, the Mitchells off of Mount Airy, Roger Wilson, Billy Lewis, Joe Cullop, Shade Tree Mechanic, Carolina Stinger, Virginia Hillbilly, Linwood and Gene Dowlery. We had a guy who showed up at East Bend every weekend. He raced a beige Pontiac convertible. He drove it there, drove it home, and he had no legs. And he raced that car every weekend. And I mean every weekend. And that's a name I wish I knew today to say out loud. He and many others like him belong in the East Bend Hall of Fame. The Morton Family Hall of Fame, to be honest, they belong in the Weekend Warrior Hall of Fame. What I'm saying or sharing or reminding is you do not get to the Hall of Fame, the Driver Hall of Fame, the Pioneers Hall of Fame, by yourself. It takes many, many people around you who believe in you and support you. Workers who show up every Saturday night and Sunday afternoon. Racers, not only the greatest of the great racers, but the every weekend racer who spends their time during the week preparing their car and then spending their money on the weekend to race it. And of course the fans, the spectators who show up every time the gates open. I wish I could call out every name of a spectator who visited my parents' track. But I want to share this, and I shared the same thing at the 50th anniversary of Elk Creek Dragway, which my parents built in 1967. My parents, I don't care what anyone says, or if anyone wants to debate it, bottom line, our parents loved the worker. They loved the spectator. But they understood that without the drag racer, none of this was possible. They understood, and they raised us kids to understand. And they made certain that everyone that worked at their track for over 30 years, it was about the drag racer. Without the racer, you didn't have track owners. You didn't have workers. You didn't have spectators. Nada. We wouldn't be here today without the drag racer. One particular racer, Ken Regenthal, called my mom some years ago. It was when he was elected into this hall. And he called to thank her for guiding him through his first visit to a drag strip ever. And guiding him through his first summer of racing at East Bend Dragway. That is a Hall of Fame person. Not a drag racer. It's a Hall of Fame person. And there were so many Hall of Fame people in drag racing. Jerry Williams, Mike Boyles, Jimmy Dale Parsons, Tony Parsons, Bud Crow, Mike Dabb, Ray White, T.G. Matthews, Max Hurley, Sam Holder, C.W. Parker, Bo Moxley. And man, I always loved Grady Mitchell. And of course, those people like Ken Regenthal. So many names I've mentioned, both the big names and the Hall of Fame names. Those people started their career at East Bend Dragway in the very early 1960s. And of course, the one who created the most antics at our drag strip, had his name called up here more than anybody today, Roy Hill. 2 years ago, I was standing right out here. I went up to this little stand and I reminded him who I was. And I said, Roy, you still have that two-headed corn you used at Elk Creek that night for lane choice? He said, I might. Dad first met Roy Hill at Sam Kennedy's garage. Roy was standing on a pop crate so he could reach over to work on the car. So many great stories over the year. Once we had a match race with Roberta Schultz and Bunny Burkett. My mom had me hand deliver the appearance checks. I was about 13 years old. So went over to Bunny's trailer, handed her her check, told her thank you. Went over to Roberta Schultz's trailer, went into the side door. And when I opened that door, she was standing there. She didn't have anything between her and the sky except the look on my face. And she told my mom later, she said, I may have scarred your son for life, and she did. And it was a positive scar. But she also told my mom, she says, as surprised as he was, I was more surprised because I was expecting Roy Hill to walk in that scene. I was going to say Larry Waller, and he's not here today. I was going to say C.W. Parker, and he's not here today. When I walked in to see C.W. Parker, or Roy Hill, and he asked my sister if she was married, I said, I'm going Roy Hill. We had people show up every weekend to help our parents. Dick Miles, Bo Moxley, Brian Billings, he's right here today. The three Sutherland brothers and their dad Fred Sutherland, Ricky Zachary, Gene Pollard, Rob and Eva Jones, Mark Jones, Kathy Bryant, Cecile Hale. I could go on for a long time. And I've always said if reality TV was around in the 70s, we would have been the first Duck Dynasty. Like then, we had all the crazy events. I mean, my parents were marketers. They were promoters. We had jet cars, funny cars, Southern style match races, dirt digs, streaking contests, wet t-shirt contests. We even had Easter egg hunts on Easter Sunday at East Bend. The first jet car at East Bend, remember the fence behind it was metal, like tin, like you would put on your roof. That jet car come up there, it hit the afterburner, it blew every piece of metal off that fence out into Highway 67. It was flying up in the air. Not a single car was damaged, not a person was harmed, but those fans went bananas. And when you had a jet car at East Bend Dragway for the rest of their career, it was packed. And like Duck Dynasty, we had all the names. Names like Grit, Bryant, Big Dauber, Little Dauber, Head, Porky, Wheatley, Silver Dollar. Larry Waller was one of my parents' first hires. East Bend was where it all began for him at the age of 16. And of course, they drug all of us kids to the track every Saturday night, every Sunday afternoon. Our parents owning a drag strip put special meaning in how we have all lived our lives. And you know what? None of this would have happened without George Butner. George Butner. He and Cleo, to be honest, they changed my parents' life path. They just changed their path. And George and Cleo helped each one of our kids when we needed something. They helped us with whether it was our first car, our first home, or starting a business, or maybe even all three. My best George Butner impression, if anybody of you guys knew George Butner. Otherwise, I'm going to hand you cash, and I want you to hand me cash back. He said the IRS come up here and asked me for my social security number, and I told him, I don't have yours, so I don't know any reason you need to have mine. Quick story. My dad's a lifelong fan of drag racing, and I have solid proof. It's his grandkids' favorite story. It was Thanksgiving. All the family was around at my parents' house. And Dad was so excited because there was a new drag racing show on TV. He was super irritated, though, because he put it on the DVR, and every time he would try to watch it, the prior show would run over, he would say. And he said that prior show has a man dressing up as a woman. And the girls said, Paul, that's RuPaul's Drag Race. If you don't know, RuPaul is about a man who drags. He was simply trying to continue being a fan of drag racing. Bottom line, I named a lot of names today, and I've only said my parents' name one time. And that's because I feel like my parents understand. That is because of all the names that I called out. That's a big part of why they're being honored here today. the racer, the fan, the worker. But I want to remind my parents that they are indeed being honored. And why? It's because they treated all those names and all those people with respect for years and years. It's because they never adjusted an advertised purse. They paid every advertised purse, regardless of the situation. They paid every appearance fee. They honored their word for years and years. And they were true promoters. They were true marketers. They created a lot of new ideas, and they made a lot of old ideas better. And it's a combination of all those things that my parents, Tommy and Neil Morton, are being honored here today as a couple. And I'll repeat that, as a couple. A combination of all those names and all those things is why they are being so honored here today. So we say thank you to the North Carolina Drag Racers Hall of Fame for so deservedly honoring Tommy and Neil Morton. And I'll say one last thing. I've got 3 daughters and a niece who look better than any Miss Winston you've ever seen. And they're going to be carrying around a little poster board and some Sharpies. If anybody of you guys want to put a little note or just sign it to my parents, I'm going to deliver it to my dad today. You guys stand up just real quickly. North Carolina Drag Racers Hall of Fame, thank you.
Darren, you might need these. Great 7.5 speech over it. Anyway, we got special remarks coming up from Buddy Martin.
How about a hand for Buddy Martin?
I was hoping you had their hands in their pockets, Steve. Let me be one of the first to congratulate these people, and especially my friends that I've got over there for a long, long time. But I was just thinking a few minutes ago, what's going to happen to this Hall of Fame if Roy's not here? So last year we didn't get to do something that I wanted to do, and so Bubba's graciously gave me the time to do this, and I wanted to do something to honor Jim Turner. I think everybody here, Jim has affected some way, somehow, and the guy would just bend over backwards to do whatever he could to make things work for you. And the fact that he was trying to do this to help the kids, that just really impresses me, because it's a situation where if any of us were in a situation where it's bad enough to have a child that has an issue, but it's really bad when you have a child and you have an issue and you can't afford the cost. And with what these guys have done to help promote and raise money for the kids to get help, and the parents not have to be burdened in paying and can't, I bought a little bit bigger hat today than I usually bring, and I'm going to start this thing off, and I want somebody, all of you, to just do what you got in your heart to do. But we're gonna raise some money, and we're gonna do it to honor Jim and what he's done and what he's doing. And so I'd like to be the first to get into the hat, and since we didn't get to do one last year, usually I like to put one of these in the hat, but since I didn't get to put one last year, I'm gonna try to put some as extra. So I just hope that all of you will keep that in mind. And I sure thank very much all of you for doing this, and it'll, I think Jim will know it. I'm ready to go. Now, we can do this like we do in church, we can pass it down, or even.
Okay, in closing, all donations are greatly appreciated. In closing, I'd like to say a few things. I would like to thank SRC Motorsports, Larry Granger, Randy Weatherford, wonderful person, Randy Weatherford, WS Construction, and Hayes Jewelers of Lexington for our awards. Steve, anything?
Thank you so much. See you next year. Yeah.
All right.